It was a crisp autumn morning at O'Hare International Airport in Chicago, one of the busiest in the world. The terminal was bustling with travelers hurrying to catch their flights, each in their own world. The familiar hum of overhead announcements, rolling suitcases, and the hurried footsteps of impatient passengers filled the air. But amidst the noise and activity, two girls stood out, Jasmine and Maya, identical twins, but so much more than just another pair of travelers. Jasmine and Maya were 14 years old, brimming with excitement as they prepared to board Flight 229 from Chicago to Los Angeles. Their sleek black backpacks adorned with colorful patches bounced on their backs, and their oversized hoodies made them look effortlessly cool, as though they belonged to a world of their own. Though they shared the same round, caramel-colored eyes and tightly coiled hair that framed their faces in identical curls, their personalities couldn't have been more different. Jasmine was the more studious of the two. With a book perpetually in her hands, she found solace in the written word. She was a dreamer, with her head often lost in the pages of historical novels or the biographies of great leaders. Maya, on the other hand, was the more spontaneous and social twin. She lived for the moment, always eager to explore new experiences and meet new people. She was the one who would often pull her sister into spontaneous adventures, whether it was experimenting with new art techniques or planning out wild ideas for the future. As they made their way through the crowded terminal, they were clearly excited, but not in the loud, attention-seeking way some kids were. No, Jasmine and Maya had a calm, eager energy about them. They weren't just heading to Los Angeles to see the sights. They were looking forward to a trip that was more than just a vacation. Their parents, Malik and Erica, had decided to take a break from their hectic work schedules and treat the twins to an educational trip and adventure that combined fun and learning in a city full of culture and history. The twins were thrilled at the idea of exploring museums, seeing the Hollywood Walk of Fame, and experiencing the vibrant energy of LA. But little did they know that their journey was about to be overshadowed by something they had never experienced. Before prejudice from an unlikely source. As they approached the gate, the twins were met by Paula Wilkins, the flight attendant who would be overseeing their section. Paula had been working as a flight attendant for nearly 15 years. She had seen her fair share of passengers. Some were pleasant, some were demanding, but most of them blended into the background. She prided herself on her professionalism, but also in the assumptions she had formed over the years about what passengers in first class should look like. She had seen them all: businessmen in suits, older couples dressed in formal attire, and celebrities who hid behind dark sunglasses. But today, Paula was about to meet a family that didn't fit the image she had in her head of the typical first class traveler. Jasmine and Maya approached the gate, and as soon as Paula laid eyes on them, something in her shifted. The girls, despite their youthful energy, didn't seem to match her expectations of what first-class passengers should be. Their clothing was simple casual hoodies, leggings, and sneakers. The colors were bright, playful, even a bit youthful. Paula immediately found herself judging them, not just for their appearance, but for their youthfulness and casual demeanor. They looked too carefree. They looked too young to be flying first class, especially without adult supervision. Her gaze flickered down to the boarding passes in Jasmine's hand, and she felt a knot tighten in her chest. "Are you sure you're in the right line?" Paula asked sharply, raising an eyebrow, the words leaving her mouth before she could stop them. Jasmine, taken aback by the question, blinked. She had never been treated like this before. "Yes, this is our line," she replied, trying to hide the unease that was creeping up her spine. Paula studied the boarding passes, still skeptical, and handed them back after a moment. There was a flicker of doubt in her eyes. Was it possible the tickets were a mistake? Was someone trying to sneak in, pretending to be something they weren't? She had worked with passengers who had tried to scam their way into first class before. But something about Jasmine and Maya's calm demeanor made Paula hesitate. She looked at their excited, innocent faces and wondered why they hadn't dressed up for the occasion. She wasn't sure if she was just being overly cautious or if something didn't quite add up. "All right, go ahead," Paula said after her. Long pause, her voice flat. Jasmine and Maya exchanged a confused glance but said nothing. They walked down the jet bridge, their excitement still bubbling beneath the surface. Paula, however, couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. She stayed at her post, watching them as they passed, her eyes narrowing with suspicion. Her mind churned with judgments. And in the space of a few seconds, Paula had made a decision about these girls. As they entered the plane and made their way to their first-class seats, Jasmine and Maya couldn't help but notice that something felt off. The first-class cabin was just as they had imagined, spacious, comfortable, and luxurious, but Paula's cold demeanor had made them feel strangely out of place. The flight attendants were usually polite, but this one had been different. It wasn't just her formal tone, it was the way she kept looking at them, the way her gaze lingered like she was scrutinizing them, evaluating their right to be there. The twins exchanged uneasy glances, but neither of them said anything. They had been raised to always be polite, to never make waves, and to take the high road. So, they kept quiet. They found their seats, and immediately Maya's excitement returned. "Jasmine, look at this. It's huge," she said, practically bouncing in her seat as she reclined it. "This is better than any hotel room." Jasmine smiled at her sister's enthusiasm, but a strange knot settled in her stomach. She couldn't stop thinking about how Paula had looked at them, how her eyes had lingered on their casual clothes. Was there something wrong with how they looked? Was it that their outfits didn't fit the first-class standard? As the plane ascended, the twins tried to settle into the comfort of their seats, but the feeling of being watched didn't leave them. They had been on flights before, even in first class, but this time felt different. As they sipped their drinks and flicked through the in-flight entertainment, Jasmine couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Paula, meanwhile, was walking up and down the aisles, her eyes darting from passenger to passenger, checking for any signs of disruption. When she passed the twins again, she couldn't help herself. She stopped in front of their seats, a tight smile on her lips. "Excuse me, may I see your boarding passes again?" she asked, her tone more clipped than before. Jasmine hesitated for a moment before pulling them out again. Her heart sank. "Is there something wrong?" she asked quietly. Paula didn't respond immediately. She just took the tickets, glancing at them with a meticulous eye, inspecting them as if she expected to find something that didn't belong. The twins exchanged a nervous glance. Maya, usually full of energy, had quieted down, sensing the tension. Jasmine's brow furrowed with confusion and discomfort. Paula handed the tickets back a moment later. "Everything seems fine," she said, but her voice was cold, her smile forced. Jasmine could feel the weight of Paula's gaze as she walked away, and for the rest of the flight, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were being treated differently from the other passengers. As the plane cruised comfortably above the clouds, Jasmine and Maya found it difficult to relax. The tension from Paula's scrutiny weighed heavily on their minds, making it hard to focus on anything else. The bright excitement of their adventure was slowly fading into the background, replaced by an unsettling feeling they couldn't shake. It wasn't that they hadn't flown first class before. In fact, this was the third time their parents had treated them to such a trip, a luxury they were always grateful for. But it was the way Paula had looked at them, the doubt in her eyes that made them feel like they didn't belong. Jasmine tried to refocus her attention on her book, but the words blurred as she replayed the flight attendant's cold expression. Maya, ever the optimist, tried to brush it off with a smile, but even she couldn't ignore the discomfort in the air. "Do you think she's mad at us?" Maya whispered, fidgeting in her seat. "I don't know." Jasmine replied softly, keeping her eyes on her book. "But she definitely doesn't like us." Maya's brow furrowed. "But we didn't do anything wrong, right? We're just us." Jasmine nodded, but the uncertainty still lingered. "Yeah, but she keeps looking at us like we're in the wrong place, like we don't belong here." The more the twins tried to brush it off, the more they realized how odd the situation had become. Paula had been curt, almost dismissive, and the repeated questioning made them feel like they were being treated differently than the other passengers. The discomfort didn't end there. As the flight wore on, Paula came back around to offer drinks. By this point, most of the other passengers had settled in, their own flights of leisure or business progressing without a hitch. The polite exchanges between the staff and the passengers seemed effortless, but with every moment, Paula's behavior toward the twins became harder to ignore. As Paula neared their seats again, the twins stiffened instinctively. This time, Jasmine couldn't pretend that everything was fine. Paula, her lips twisted in that practiced but strained smile, leaned toward them. "Would you like anything else?" Paula asked, her voice icy, almost too sweet. Jasmine looked up, meeting Paula's gaze. "No, thank you," she said politely, but the words felt hollow. Maya, sensing the tension, smiled up at Paula. "Could we have a little more water, please?" she asked, her voice bright but tinged with uncertainty. Paula's eyes narrowed slightly as she nodded, turning away. There was no warmth in her smile now, just a mechanical politeness that only deepened the unease the twins felt. As Paula moved down the aisle, Jasmine and Maya exchanged a look, both silent. "I don't get it," Maya whispered. "What's her problem with us?" Jasmine shrugged, trying to make sense of it. "Maybe she thinks we don't deserve to be in first class. Maybe she thinks we're too young or too casual. But that's crazy," Maya exclaimed, her voice louder than she intended. She quickly glanced around to make sure no one had overheard. "It's not like we're doing anything wrong. We're just being us." Jasmine gave her sister a small smile, but her heart wasn't in it. "I know, but it feels like we're being judged. Like we don't fit the mold." The flight went on, but for Jasmine and Maya, it felt like an endless spiral of discomfort. Every time Paula walked by, her gaze lingered on them. Every time she interacted with another passenger, it felt like she was deliberately avoiding them, as though they were invisible or less important than the others. Hours passed, and the plane began its descent toward Los Angeles. The cabin crew started preparing for landing, but for the twins, the flight felt like it had dragged on forever. As the wheels of the plane touched down on the tarmac, Jasmine couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Paula had managed to make them feel like they were trespassing in a space they were supposed to belong to. Just as they were about to disembark, Paula stopped at their row again, her expression tight, her professionalism now more of a mask than ever. "Have a pleasant stay in Los Angeles," she said, but it was clear she wasn't speaking from a place of warmth. Her words hung in the air, a quiet reminder of the coldness she had shown them throughout the flight. The twins didn't respond, simply nodding in acknowledgement. As they exited the plane, they both felt a sense of relief, as though they could finally leave the tension behind. But it stayed with them, an unspoken weight they carried with them as they made their way through the airport. They were grateful to finally be on solid ground, away from the air of suspicion that had surrounded them for hours. Back in the airline's office. Meanwhile, in the airline's headquarters, Paula's behavior had not gone unnoticed. Christopher Lawson, one of the airline's co-owners, had been made aware of the complaint filed by the family about their experience on Flight 229. He wasn't pleased. Christopher, known for his calm demeanor, had been reviewing the situation with Natalie Green, the airline's senior operations manager. "I've read the complaint," Christopher said, flipping through the papers with a calm but serious expression. "It's clear that the passengers Jasmine and Maya felt uncomfortable. Their father, Malik, has written in, stating that Paula's behavior was unprofessional and borderline discriminatory." Natalie nodded gravely. "Paula's actions don't reflect the values we uphold here. She questioned them several times during the flight, and we've never had issues with first passengers who don't fit the typical mold. This kind of behavior can't be tolerated." Christopher sat back in his chair, his eyes focused. "Paula has been a long-serving employee, but she's been stuck in her ways. We've had complaints about her before, nothing quite as serious as this, but still concerning. It's clear that bias is influencing her actions. This needs to be handled." He looked at Natalie, his tone resolute. "We need to make sure this never happens again. It's about more than just customer service. It's about respect. Everyone deserves it. Every passenger, regardless of their appearance or background." Back to the twins. While all of this was happening behind the scenes, Jasmine and Maya were trying to enjoy their time in Los Angeles. They went to museums, visited famous landmarks, and explored the city with wide eyes. They took pictures by the Hollywood sign, their faces alight with excitement. But the memory of the flight and Paula's cold treatment lingered in the back of their minds. That night, as they sat in their hotel room, Jasmine couldn't stop thinking about what had happened on the plane. She felt conflicted. Part of her wanted to forget it and enjoy the trip, but the other part couldn't shake the feeling of being othered. "Do you think we did something wrong?" Jasmine asked Maya softly, sitting at the edge of her bed. Maya shook her head, her curls bouncing slightly. "Of course not. We didn't do anything wrong. She just had some issues, I think. Maybe she's just not used to seeing people like us in first class." Jasmine didn't reply immediately. She knew Maya was trying to cheer her up, but the discomfort was still there. "I don't know, Maya. It just felt wrong, you know?" Maya sighed, sitting beside her sister. "I get it. But we can't let her make us feel like we don't belong. We belong wherever we want to be, Jasmine. She's the one who has the problem." Jasmine smiled at her sister's words, feeling a little better. But in the back of her mind, the sting of Paula's attitude lingered. A reminder that sometimes the world would try to make them feel less than they were. The next few days in Los Angeles were everything Jasmine and Maya had hoped for. They visited the Getty Museum, walked through the Hollywood Walk of Fame, and spent hours exploring local art galleries. They took in the sights and sounds of a city that was completely different from the life they knew back in Chicago. The excitement and joy of their trip began to overshadow the unpleasantness of the flight. But deep down, the sting of Paula's behavior still lingered in the back of their minds. The more Jasmine thought about it, the more she realized how wrong Paula's treatment had felt. She knew her family had worked hard for the privilege of flying first class. And yet here they were, being judged based on appearances alone. It wasn't just that Paula had treated them as if they didn't belong. It was that her bias had been so obvious, so unapologetic, that it left them feeling small. Maya, ever the optimist, continued to push through with a smile, finding joy in every corner of their adventure. But even she couldn't completely shake the discomfort of being scrutinized by someone who should have been looking out for their comfort and safety. Despite the lingering tension, the girls tried their best to focus on their experience. They spent hours sightseeing, laughing at tourist attractions, and taking photos by every monument they could find. But every so often, the question would creep into their minds. What was it about us that made Paula treat us this way? Meanwhile, Back at the airline, the situation had escalated. Christopher Lawson had taken the complaint seriously, and after reviewing the incident with the rest of the management team, it became clear that something needed to change. It wasn't just about fixing the immediate issue, it was about addressing a deeper systemic problem that could impact the airline's reputation. Discrimination, even in subtle forms, was never acceptable. Back at the airline headquarters, Christopher Lawson sat across from Paula Wilkins in the airline's human resources office, the weight of the conversation heavy between them. He had already spoken to Natalie Green and other members of the leadership team, and now it was time to have the difficult conversation with Paula herself. The company could no longer ignore the bias that had affected their operations. Paula, Christopher began, his voice calm but firm. I've read the report about your behavior toward the passengers on Flight 229. Your treatment of Jasmine and Maya was not only unprofessional, it was discriminatory. It's clear that you made judgments about them based on their appearance and their age. And that's not acceptable. Paula's face drained of color. She had been a flight attendant for over a decade, and in all those years, she had never faced such a direct confrontation. She had always prided herself on her ability to handle difficult situations, but this was different. This wasn't about a rowdy passenger or a misunderstanding. It was about her own actions. I didn't mean for it to come across that way, Paula muttered, her voice barely above a whisper. I was just trying to follow the rules. I didn't think they belonged there. Christopher's gaze hardened and he leaned forward slightly. You didn't think they belonged there because they didn't match your expectations of what a first-class passenger should look like, did you? Paula opened her mouth, but no words came out. She had no defense. She knew he was right. We have procedures, Christopher continued, but we also have values. We are an airline that prides itself on treating every passenger with respect, regardless of their background, their appearance, or their age. Your actions weren't just a violation of company protocol, they were a violation of our core values. Paula blinked rapidly, trying to hold back the tears that had suddenly formed. She had always thought of herself as a fair person, someone who followed the rules. But the truth was, she had allowed her biases to cloud her judgment. I never meant to hurt anyone, she said, her voice faltering. I just saw two young girls and they didn't look like the usual first-class passengers. I thought something was off, and I didn't know how to handle it. Christopher sighed, leaning back in his chair. You need to understand, Paula, that the way you treated those girls, questioning them multiple times, making them feel unwelcome, that's not how we handle situations like this. You singled them out. You treated them like they were intruders. And that's not what we stand for. The weight of the conversation settled heavily on Paula's shoulders. She felt guilty, ashamed. But there was something else too. As the minutes passed, something inside her shifted. She realized that this wasn't just about her mistake on one flight. It was about a pattern of behavior she had allowed to persist over the years. It was about the biases she had never fully confronted, the assumptions she had made about people who didn't fit her idea of what a first-class passenger should look like. I'm sorry, she whispered, barely able to meet his gaze. I was wrong. I realize that now. I didn't see them as people. I saw them as something else. Christopher paused, his expression softening just a bit. Apologies are the first step, Paula. But actions speak louder than words. You've been a good flight attendant for years, but we need to ensure this doesn't happen again. This isn't just about fixing one issue. It's about changing the way we see things, about confronting our own biases before they affect others. Back to Jasmine and Maya. Jasmine and Maya, though enjoying their time in Los Angeles, couldn't forget the treatment they had received. They knew they had done nothing wrong. They were just two young girls, excited to explore the world, but Paula's cold demeanor had left them questioning things they never had before. Were they being judged just because of their age? Their appearance? Their race? It didn't make sense, but it stung. On the morning before their flight home, while eating breakfast at the hotel, Jasmine brought up the topic again. Do you think she would have treated us differently if we looked more like the other first-class passengers? She asked, her voice thoughtful but heavy. Maya shrugged, her gaze drifting out the window at the Los Angeles skyline. Maybe, she said, but it doesn't matter. We belong wherever we are. She had a problem with us, but that's her issue, not ours. Jasmine nodded, her eyes downcast. I guess so. It just doesn't feel fair. Like we didn't get the same respect as everyone else just because we didn't fit what she thought was right. Maya reached over, placing a hand on her sister's. You know, maybe it's not about us. Maybe it's about her. Maybe she needs to learn that we deserve the same respect as anyone else, no matter what. The flight back. As the twins boarded the return flight, their heads held high, they were met with a completely different atmosphere. This time, there was no coldness in the air, no lingering doubt in the flight attendant's eyes. In fact, the crew was warm and welcoming, making Jasmine and Maya feel like they truly belonged in first class. The captain even greeted them with a friendly smile as they settled into their seats. Welcome aboard, the head flight attendant said with a cheerful tone. We hope you have a comfortable flight. Jasmine and Maya exchanged a relieved glance. They could sense the difference immediately. The flight attendants treated them with the same kindness and respect as they did with the other passengers. It was a small but significant change, one that made them feel valued, not for what they wore or how they looked, but for who they were. The resolution. Back in Chicago, as they deplaned and made their way through the terminal, the twins were met with the comforting embrace of their parents, Malik and Erica. They shared their stories of Los Angeles, their favorite parts of the trip, the places they'd visited, and the excitement they had felt. But when they were alone later that evening, after all the excitement of returning home had settled, Malik sat them down for a conversation. We know what happened on the flight, Malik said, his voice serious but gentle. We spoke with the airline. They've taken the situation seriously. Jasmine and Maya both looked at him, surprised but relieved. They've addressed it, Malik continued. Paula will be undergoing sensitivity training, and the airline is making sure this never happens again. Maya's face lit up and Jasmine smiled, a sense of relief washing over her. So she's learning from it. Yes, Malik replied. It's a good reminder for everyone that respect should always come first, regardless of how someone looks.